and for the citizens not just Iran and neighboring countries, but also for states beyond the Middle East. The sponsors of the draft just suggested that we close our eyes to this unlawful action and unprovoked aggression against Iran by United States and Israel. Since the very beginning, working on the text, the Russian Federation, together with our Chinese colleagues, have consistently been conveying these concerns to Arab states. We've voiced them in the course of informal consultations, and we also provided the co-sponsors and all other members of the Council our written comments and suggestions. Specifically, we propose the following. First of all, that we call upon all the parties to the current conflict to stop the strike. Second, that we condemn the strikes not only against the countries of the Gulf, but also against the territory of Iran. And we express regret having to do with the attacks against civilian facilities, which resulted in the death of civilians and the supreme leader of Iran, and express solidarity with the people of Iran in this difficult time. Third, demand that all states reject provocations or any action that could lead to further escalation. Additionally, we spoke in favor of confirming the need to settle any disputes using peaceful means, and a balanced statement pointing to the fact that the right to self-defense under the Charter is something that the Arab states and also Iran have. At the same time, despite the principled position of my country, in particular the categorical condemnation of the aggression by the United States and Israel, we try to make sure that our language was as restrained as possible without naming the initiators of the current crisis, without calling them by name. When we were working on this document, we were guided by just one consideration: objectivity. But the authors of the draft resolution simply ignored the position of Russia and China. We are most disappointed by the fact that there was a rejection to include into the text the appeal to the political and diplomatic settlement of the conflict. This was done without any explanations provided, as though we were just saying in a vacuum. We think that such an approach to working on the outcomes of the Security Council is not constructive. It's irresponsible, and it is unfitting for the responsible members of the Council. Mr. President, passing such a resolution cannot lead us to peace in the region of Middle East. It will worsen the differences between the key players in the region. And we are worried that the GCC countries, as they try to condemn Iran, could end up crossing out all of the recent accomplishments in trying to restore good faith relations with Tehran and push away for many years the prospect of creating a common security space for the entire region. Furthermore, the positive decision of the Council on this document we just had could be interpreted by bad faith actors, and first and foremost by those who started this war, as a blessing to continue aggression actions against Iran. And we appeal to all UN members to understand this. I thank you.
I thank the representative of Russia for the statement. I shall now make a statement in my capacity as the representative of the United States. Colleagues, as we woke this morning, civilians, families, children were trapped, sheltering in bunkers all over the Middle East. They were wondering if the only thing they could count on today were more missiles and more drones from the Iranian regime. They could not be certain whether they would have the support of the international community. They couldn't be certain if they would have the support of the United Nations Security Council, which frankly in years past has failed to speak out about Iran's consistent and grotesque violations of international law. Well, to the people, under the barrage and the constant bombardment of the Iranian regime, the UN Security Council stands with you. 135 countries stand with you.
भूख लगती जाती है।
भूख लगेगी तो स्कूल में पीछे ही रहेगा और पेट भरेगा गंदम से। इसीलिए नेस्ले बुनियाद लाया नया पीने वाला दलिया, जिसमें है गंदम और आयरन की दोहरी ग़िज़ाइयत। बस पानी में घोलो और पी लो, इससे पेट भरे और ग़िज़ाइयत भी मिले। नेस्ले बुनियाद का नया पीने वाला दलिया, पेट भरेगा तो आगे बढ़ेगा, सिर्फ 40 रुपए
From
में।
Nestle.
Here's what they don't want you to hear. And this is common sense, colleagues. The Fairmont Hotel in Dubai, that's not a military base or installation. That's why dozens and dozens of tourists have fled as it was set on fire. Tourists from the United Kingdom, from Liverpool, from other countries, all trying to vacation there, do business there. The civilian airport in Dubai, a global hub of commerce and tourism, also coming under fire. That's not a military installation. At 90 years old, Bahrain's only oil refinery, that's not a military target. Qatar's natural gas facilities that power the economies of the world, those weren't military targets. Even Oman, who until recently was trying to find a diplomatic solution, it's been hit too. Its ports are not military targets. The cargo ships that are being attacked and set aflame, many of them carrying food and other supplies around the world, one of them from Thailand. Those aren't military targets. So look, these attacks were so brutal and so indiscriminate as Iran shoots in all directions that nations that previously had serious disagreements have now joined together. They've now spoken as one voice. Iran's strategy of sowing chaos, of trying to hold their neighbors hostage, trying to shake the resolve of the region, has clearly backfired, and that was shown by this vote today. The Kingdom of Bahrain, itself a victim of these attacks, drafted this resolution, led the negotiations on this resolution. Our allies and partners from across the region, Jordan, Kuwait, Oman, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, Syria, and the United Arab Emirates supported it, as well as a UN Security Council record number of co-sponsors, 135, and we read every one of them today so that the entire world could hear it. This is exactly what the United Nations should be about. Today's action is a direct and unequivocal statement from the Gulf countries condemning the brutality of the Iranian regime, whose practice of targeting civilians and civilian infrastructure is reprehensible, and the entire world is calling it out for what it is. Iran is indiscriminately attacking innocent families and civilians living in countries spanning Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Bahrain, Kuwait, Qatar, Oman, Cyprus, Azerbaijan, Jordan, Iraq, and Turkey. All have felt the consequences of Iran's missiles, drones, and attacks. This council and the international community must speak plainly and be honest with the world about Iran's long history of undermining international peace and security, and for decades, and we all know this, Iran has supported terrorist violence against civilians around the world, and as we all just saw in recent months, massacred its own people. In order to maintain its iron grip on power, the Iranian regime exported instability abroad, turning neighbors like Lebanon, Syria, Iraq, Yemen, and Gaza into battlegrounds and leaving them no hope of peace or prosperity. Earlier today in this council, I challenge any one of you, anyone in the world, to show me a country that is better off because of Iran's intervention and instability. This is why the UN has voted in resolution after resolution that the Iranian regime must never and can never have a nuclear weapon. And by constantly refusing to comply with international safeguards that all of our countries support, Iran's nuclear program was barreling towards a nuclear disaster. The IAEA made clear that there was no reason to have nearly 1,000 pounds of 60% highly enriched uranium unless you wanted to build a nuclear bomb. And no one in this chamber can be surprised by Iran's promise of death to Israel, death to America, and with nuclear weapons, death to the world. And at an emergency meeting in January, not long ago, we raised the Islamic Republic of Iran's decades-old campaign of repression, subjecting its young and old alike to violence, torture, and censorship. Colleagues, the Iranian regime's abuses are a stain for all who tolerate it, drawn from the blood of their victims. President Trump and his team exhausted every attempt at diplomatic negotiations. He sought peace and to end 47 years of hostility and attacks, while Iran only sought more missiles, more drones, and a pathway to nuclear Armageddon. President Trump has drawn his red line here. Iran crossed it once again, and now the world is facing the consequences. And these consequences that the United States does not bring alone. We are grateful to our partners, Bahrain, who have bravely pushed this resolution forward. We are grateful to the 135 countries that co-sponsored it, and we will never hesitate to hold the Iranian regime to account for its continuing threats to international peace and security. I thank you. I will now resume my duties as Council President. The representative of Bahrain has asked for the floor to make a further statement.
Thank you, Mr. President. I apologize for asking to take the floor again. I would like to express sadness for what was involved and what was mentioned by the representative of the Russian Federation regarding GCC member states. I would like to clarify that GCC countries have proposed and exerted a lot of mediation and diplomatic efforts. We have never been territories from which attacks were launched, and our territories were never used to attack other countries. I speak to you now while sirens are sounding in countries, in our countries and in the region, and therefore the Iranian claims are refuted by the facts, because the attacks continue, and they continue against civilian facilities and against civilians. Thank you, Mr. President.
I thank the representative of Bahrain for the statement. The Council is ready to proceed to the vote on the second draft resolution before it. I now give the floor to those members of the Council who wish to make statements before the vote. I give the floor to the representative of the Russian Federation.
Mr. President, We have already mentioned today the non-constructive nature of the resolution, which was just endorsed today with a condemnation of strikes by Iran against countries in the region, which is one-sided, and we were not convinced of the opposite by the statement just made by the representative of Bahrain. Right now, the Russian Federation is calling upon members of the Security Council to pass an impartial document aimed at urgently de-escalating the situation. This will allow the Council to discharge its direct responsibility to maintain international peace and security. The draft that my country prepared leaves outside of the equation the differences amongst members of the Council on the reasons for the current unprecedented tension on the Middle East. It is simple, it's direct, and it's unequivocal in nature, and it has 4 operative paragraphs. The first one urges all parties to immediately stop their military activities and refrain from any steps which could lead to further escalation in the Middle East and beyond. The second one firmly condemns any strikes against civilian infrastructure and underscoring the obligations of all parties under international law, including international humanitarian law. 3. It underlines the importance of ensuring security of all states without exception in the region. And 4, it strongly encourages all parties concerned to immediately return to a negotiating table without any further delay. We are convinced that all of these elements fully reflect the opinions of the Security Council members related to current events, including those opinions that were voiced during Security Council meeting on the 20th of February. At the same time, when we're preparing the text, we intentionally did not name any of the parties. We understand very well that such an approach would have made consensus impossible, and as a consequence would impede the Council in sending a signal of principal importance for the need of immediate de-escalation and for restraint on the part of all conflicting parties. As we're working on the text, the Russian Federation disseminated a document for written comments from members of the Council and also conducted in-person informal consultations. We note that not a single delegation expressed any objections or concerns as regards the text of the text. In this context, we count on all colleagues to demonstrate responsibility and will support the Russian draft, which could become a timely and urgently needed step for a political and diplomatic settlement of the situation in the Middle East. I thank you.
I thank the representative of the Russian Federation for his statement. I shall now put to the vote the draft resolution contained in document S/2026/159 submitted by the Russian Federation. Will those in favor of the draft resolution contained in document S/2026/159 please raise their hand? Those against? Those against? Abstentions? The result of the voting is as follows: 4 votes in favor, 2 votes against, 9 abstentions. The draft resolution has not been adopted, having failed to obtain the required number of votes. I now give the floor to those members of the Council who wish to make statements after the vote. I give the floor to the representative of the United Kingdom.
Thank you, President. The United Kingdom's priority is restoring regional stability in the Middle East as soon as possible and preventing this crisis escalating further. Iran's ongoing reckless attacks against countries across the region threaten to expand the conflict. That's why the UK voted in favour of the resolution tabled by Bahrain condemning Iran's attacks against the territories of its neighbours. That text was grounded in the facts and backed by the region, responding directly to the needs of our partners in the Gulf and Jordan. It focused squarely on protecting civilians and restoring regional stability, and we're pleased that this Council was able to send a clear condemnation of Iran's reckless attacks by adopting that resolution. By contrast, this Russian resolution does nothing to address the concerns of those in the region who have faced unprovoked and unjustifiable attacks. And it is impossible to overlook the hypocrisy of Russia presenting itself here as a guardian of international peace and security. It continues to reject Ukraine's proposal for a ceasefire. It attacks Ukraine's civilian infrastructure night after night. With the very same Iranian-designed Shahed drones that are now striking targets across the Middle East and beyond. In return for Iran's support, Russia has provided Iran with advanced military capabilities, increasing the threat that Iran poses to the region. We should be in no doubt where Russia stands in this conflict. So Russia's resolution would have only served to distract this Council from the serious work required to end the conflict. That is why the UK did not support the resolution. Our collective priority must be to secure stability in the region and the protection of civilian life. That's what the UK government has been focusing on and will continue to do alongside our allies, including in this Council. I thank you.
I thank the representative of the United Kingdom for the statement. I give the floor to the representative of France.
Merci, monsieur.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, France did not support the draft resolution presented by Russia on the situation in the Middle East. As I previously stated when I explained our vote on the draft resolution tabled by Bahrain and adopted by an overwhelming majority, France is gravely concerned by the fact that the war in the Middle East continues to rumble on. We share the belief expressed by myriad members of this Council that the military escalation is not in the interest of the region, that respect for international law is the prerequisite par excellence.
सायरन बजने में 2 मिनट और रास्ता अभी खुला नहीं, तो बस घूमे एक गली और पहुंच गए हम KFC। ट्रैफिक में इफ्तार करवाने वाली यारी KFC वाली। 3 zingers, 3 leg pieces, 3 drinks and a bucket of fries, only available at KFC.
On which to bring the Council to find consensus, and it did not meet this crisis with the response it required. The results of the vote lay that fact bare. Elsewhere, the draft resolution said nothing about the overwhelming responsibility shouldered by Iran in the current escalation, including by waging indiscriminate and unjustified attacks against its regional neighbours, which posed no threat to Iran. What was said by the Russian Federation to justify its vote on Resolution 2817 incidentally marked a form of understanding on the part of that country of the Iranian strikes. And yet, Iran for years has visited threats upon its regional environment and on international peace and security. It does so through the network of militia that it finances, or controls and trains in the region. It does it through its ballistic missile programs and its nuclear program. Incidentally, the IAEA is not able to guarantee the peaceful nature of that program. And that, let us recall, is against a backdrop of its pure and simple denial, refusal, unacceptable refusal to accept the very existence of that program. The stability of the region can only be guaranteed in the long term if these threats are addressed. Mr. President, it is through diplomacy and with diplomacy alone that the region's security and stability can be guaranteed in the long term. In order for diplomacy to prevail, Iran must heed the call issued by Resolution 2817. Iran must agree to enter into negotiations in good faith to conclude a negotiated oversight of its ballistic missile and nuclear programs as well as of its regional activities. France will continue to mobilize to achieve such a negotiated solution. I thank you.
I thank the representative of France for the statement. I give the floor to the representative of China.
President, the draft resolution proposed by Russia reaffirms the purposes and principles of the UN Charter. It urges all parties to immediately cease military actions, condemns all attacks against civilians and civilian infrastructure, and encourages all parties to return to the track of diplomatic negotiations. Its content is principled and balanced, which China welcomes and supports. We are disappointed and regret that the draft was not adopted. This is a war that should not have happened, and a war that benefits no one. The history of the Middle East has repeatedly shown the world that the use of force is not the solution to problems. Armed conflicts only breed new hatred and sow the seeds of fresh crisis. The pressing priority is to immediately stop military operations, prevent the escalation and spread of hostilities, and return to dialogue and negotiations as soon as possible. China will continue to make efforts to strive for peace. I thank you, President.
I thank the representative of China for his statement. I give the floor to the representative of Bahrain.
I thank you, Mr. President. The Kingdom of Bahrain wishes to sincerely thank the Russian Federation, that friendly country, for its initiative in terms of proposing that draft resolution on the dangerous escalation in the region of the Middle East. We commend that initiative. It reflects the Russian Federation's concern and its desire to contribute to responding to events in the region. We welcome the efforts taken. However, we abstained from the vote and we did not support the draft resolution. That was because that draft resolution has adopts a general tone which in no way reflects the dangerous military escalation currently besetting the region. And that is as a result of the attacks waged by Iran, unjustified attacks. Attacks which we must condemn in the strongest terms, attacks which have affected my country and other countries that are members of the GCC as well as the Hashemite Kingdom of Jordan. These attacks are a threat and a violation of the good neighbourly relations policy and of the sovereignty of states. They are also violations of the United Nations Charter and of international law. In view of our responsibilities as countries directly concerned by the situation in the region, we have a preference for giving priority to draft resolutions which we proposed on behalf of the GCC and Jordan. Resolutions which deal with current events in more precise and realistic ways. That reflects the nature of security challenges facing the countries in the region. With that in mind, we count on the support of the international community for the draft resolution that we proposed, and that was just adopted. We express our deep appreciation for all countries which co-sponsored that draft resolution on behalf of 135 countries. This overwhelming support from the international community reflects a collective awakening to the threat that is posed by Iran. A threat that our countries have been a victim of over the last many years. Thank you.
I thank the representative of Bahrain for the statement. I give the floor to the representative of Denmark.
President, Denmark abstained on the draft resolution presented by Russia today, as Denmark does not consider that the Russian Federation introduced this resolution in good faith. The resolution put forward by the Kingdom of Bahrain represent a genuine effort to respond to the concerns of the region and contribute meaningfully to de-escalation in the Middle East. That resolution, which the Council has just adopted, has a clear operational focus guided by the region, which should be the direction of our collective efforts. We regret that, rather than being guided by the voices of the region, and indeed by the overwhelming support expressed across the wider UN membership, the Russian Federation has instead chosen to table a new text that diverts the Council attention away from that broad support. It is well known that Iran for years has been a destabilizing factor in the region and beyond. Now, the regime in Tehran continues its destructive behavior by attacking countries in the region, including civilians and civilian objects, disrupting maritime security, and threatening regional stability, international peace and security, and the global economy. None of this is reflected in Russia's draft resolution. For this reason, Denmark did not support the resolution presented by Russia today. I thank you.
I thank the representative of Denmark for the statement. I give the floor to the representative of Latvia.
Thank you, President. Latvia voted against the resolution submitted by the Russian Federation for the following reasons. Latvia unequivocally supports the fundamental principles of the Charter of the United Nations recalled in this text, including the prohibition of the use of force against the territorial integrity or political independence of any state, as well as the international law, including international humanitarian law, protecting civilians and civilian infrastructure. And we share the deep concern regarding the current escalation of hostilities in the Middle East and beyond. However, we could not support the presented draft, as it was tabled by a permanent member of this Council, which itself is violating daily for years the very principles it now calls upon others to respect. The aggression, use of force against territorial integrity and political independence, continued attacks against civilian infrastructure and civilians carried out by Russia in Ukraine stand in total contradiction to the commitments invoked in this draft. It is cynical and represents hypocrisy of the highest order. Iran is now attacking civilians and civilian infrastructure in the region and beyond with the same weapons it is supplying to Russia to attack civilians in Ukraine. So we agree this is not a resolution submitted in good faith, and despite our agreement with the values and objectives outlined in the text, Latvia was compelled to vote against. I thank you.
I thank the representative of Latvia for the statement. I give the floor to the representative of the Russian Federation.
Mr. President, we're deeply disappointed by the fact that the Security Council today failed to pass such a resolution, such a much-demanded one, which focused on the need to de-escalate in the Middle East and to return to looking for negotiated solutions. We would like to express our appreciation to those colleagues which spoke in favor of the document Russia presented. We think that their behavior was responsible and principled, as befits members of the Security Council. Unfortunately, some of the colleagues did not manage to muster enough strength and wisdom within them to make the only correct decision, and many of them did it deliberately, because the main thing for them is to march in step with their elder brother and to listen to that brother's commands. They have just rejected the possibility for the Council to send an unequivocal demand to immediately stop hostilities and settle any and all disputes peacefully. And this shows very clearly, yet once again, that all of the loud statements on the part of those countries about how committed they are to international law, UN Charter, peace, are nothing more than empty rhetoric. Their position is dictated purely by their short-term political interests, bloc solidarity, and and the fear that they might fall out of favor with their elder friends. More than that, it is for these reasons that they prepared to continue further undermining the authorities of the Council. It is very telling that neither one of the delegations who spoke against or abstained during the voting did not manage to explain what it is that they found objectionable in our text. And the routine statements, such as the need to focus on the resolution which was put forward by Bahrain and the GCC countries, does not withstand any criticism. The Russian draft was in no way contradictory to the documents submitted by the countries of the region. It did not contain anything that was mutually exclusive in relation to that. Therefore, such words are just an absurd attempt to justify their fear to speak in support of the initiative, regardless of how balanced and depoliticized it is, only because it does not benefit those who truly provoke the bloody events in the Middle East. And what is even more dangerous, it's that what's behind their decision are other geopolitical goals. And the responsibility for any negative consequences on the ground that will come in the wake of partiality and responsibility of members of the Council rests entirely with them. That voting was a litmus test and, forgive me, an invitation to show your true colors. And we are very curious to find out, do those countries which did not support the resolution, did not understand how pathetic they look? We've already mentioned that this is not even double standards. This is surreal. This is living in the through-the-looking-glass world. And it's just a disgrace. We are going to now remind you of that when in other situations you will try to present themselves as advocates of international law. Regardless of the outcome of the voting today, Russia will continue making all efforts possible for the as quickly as possible end to the confrontation in the Middle East and settling any differences using peaceful means. And we will help the countries in the region and all countries in the conflict. And we count on
अक़वाम मुत्तहिदा की सलामती काउंसिल का इजलास इस वक्त जा रहा है और मुख्तलिफ ममालिक के मंदूबीन इस वक्त गुफ्तगू कर रहे हैं। सलामती काउंसिल में रूस की जंगबंदी की करारदाद मंजूर ना हो सकी। अमरीका ने रूस की जंगबंदी करारदाद वीटो कर दी। करारदाद के हक़ में 4 और मुखालफत में 2 वोट डाले गए। 9 अरकान गैर हाजिर रहे। सलामती काउंसिल में खलीजी ममालिक की करारदाद मंजूर कर ली गई। ईरान से हमले रोकने का मुतालबा किया गया। खलीजी ममालिक पर ईरान के हमलों की मजम्मत। खलीजी ममालिक की मंजूर करारदाद के हक़ में 13 वोट आए। खलीजी ममालिक की मंजूर करारदाद की वोटिंग में चीन और रूस गैर हाजिर रहे। पाकिस्तान ने खलीजी ममालिक की करारदाद के हक़ में वोट दिया है। सलामती काउंसिल में इस वक्त इजलास जारी है। सलामती काउंसिल में रूस की जंगबंदी की करारदाद मंजूर ना हो सकी। अमरीका ने रूस की जंगबंदी करारदाद वीटो कर दी। करारदाद के हक़ में 4 और मुखालफत में 2 वोट डाले गए। और इस वक्त आपको बराह रास्त लिए चलते हैं। अमरीकी सदर डोनाल्ड ट्रंप ओहायो में खिताब करें।
The people of Kentucky, you do it with skill and precision and pride, using equipment stamped with those beautiful words, made in the USA. Do you remember? Made in the USA. We're putting it all over the place. And we're making more and more things in the USA, more than we ever had. More people are working today in the USA than at any time in the history of our country. And by the way, do we have a great military? The best. Better than any military in the world by far. I didn't know that we're going to have to be showing it off so much, to be honest with you. I built it. In my first term, we built this military, and I didn't know that we'd have to use it quite as much as we're using it, but we're using it well, and there's no better military. There's nobody even close, so we're very proud of it. So we have in this company 2,600 employees, and they pour out their sweat and their soul into shipping the products America knows and loves, and they're doing more business than they've ever done before. And thanks to the record-setting tax cuts that we passed in the great, big, beautiful bill, biggest tax cuts in the history of our country. Tax cuts. You know, as I grew up, I'd watch politicians, and I'd always hear that, we're going to cut your taxes, cut your taxes. This is the first group of opponents. It's the first group, the Democrats. They're always saying, we're going to raise your taxes. Historically, a politician has to. Ideally, you're going to follow through. But you have to say, we're cutting taxes. They say, we're going to raise that. They were going to give you, if they won, Kamala and Joe, Sleepy Joe. But they were going to raise your taxes more than any. It was the biggest tax increase in the history of our country. And I kept saying, are they really saying this? I don't know. What do I know about politics? I haven't been doing it that long. But they were going to give you the biggest tax cut. And now again, the midterms are coming. They want to raise your taxes higher than you've ever had before. We have to win. The midterms are going to be very, very important to keep it going. But thanks to the tax cuts, which are record-setting, we passed the great, big, beautiful bill, and I'm pleased to report that Verse Logistics is investing more than $10 million into expanding its operations this year right here.
बिग बर्ड पे रमजान डिस्काउंट है अप टू 25%। ले आती मजे के चिकन नगेट्स, चिकन सीख कबाब और ड्रम स्टिक्स खाते, क्या इफ्तार होती। खुद भी कुछ सोच लिया करो। और स्पाइसी रेंज पे
फ्राइड लेमन मिंट फ्री। आओ कुछ तुम भी कर लिया करो।
In the first year, 1 year, it's the bit. Now, to a lot of people, that doesn't mean. To me, it means something else. It means jobs. That's why we have so many jobs.
ओहायो गए थे जहां से वो कैंटकी पहुंचे हैं और अपने हामियों से खिताब कर रहे हैं।
With us